Thank you for joining us. In our world today, it seems there is a greater need than ever to promote understanding and solutions for all people. Two of the leading organizations dedicated to this are the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, working to elevate development and diplomacy to build a better, safer world, and the American Jewish Committee, which is one of the oldest Jewish advocacy organizations, and according to the New York Times, the AJC is widely regarded as the Dean of American Jewish Organizations. Our guests today are Jason Gross, Executive Director of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and Brian D. Siegal, Director of the AJC Miami and Broward office. Jason Gross and Brian Siegal will join us following these messages.
Life Extension Foundation was established in 1977 and is now the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging organization. Life-saving achievements taken for granted today were pioneered by Life Extension Foundation decades ago. Life Extension is currently funding $10 million a year in research on significantly extending a healthy human lifespan. Diseases that once plagued humanity have largely been eradicated by scientific innovation. 3 leading causes of death in 1900 are no longer leading killers today. Smallpox killed millions before it was eliminated in 1979. Life Extension funds research to fight biological aging so that it also will become a relic of the past. To learn more, log on to lifeextensionfoundation.org.
Anywhere else, this would be a vacation on the Mediterranean. But here, it's also a journey into history. From modern Tel Aviv to the ancient cities of Herod, the Romans, the Crusaders. The history of Israel lives in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
With our economy the way it is today,
some people are asking why we're spending so much money overseas
and not on creating jobs right here at home. Well, actually, we're not spending much money.
Just 1% of our national budget goes to the international affairs budget. That's not a lot.
And helping create American jobs is just what that money's doing.
If you want to create jobs, you have to create more demand for products and services.
You need more customers.
And where are American companies finding more customers?
Not here, but here.
And here.
And here.
95% of the world's customers live outside the U.S.
95%!
When we sell goods to them, they're called exports. U.S. exports counted for a big part of our economic growth last year.
Half went to developing countries.
And their economies are growing 3 times faster than developed countries.
And every 10% increase in exports equals a 7% increase in jobs here.
So, how do we increase exports? Build new markets for American goods and services.
Remember that 1%? America's international affairs budget helps fund programs that improve health and education,
Supports agriculture development.
Builds a stable economy.
and creates new markets. So if we don't go to the biggest, fastest growing group of consumers, other countries will.
Other countries already are.
Investing a small amount in global development and diplomacy
It's not only the right thing to do.
It's also the smart thing to do.
To make our economy stronger.
To create more jobs.
For my mom.
for my dad.
Or my neighbor.
For me.
With us now is Mr. Jason Gross. A pleasure and privilege to have you on the show, sir.
Nice to be here today.
Please tell our audience a little bit about your organization.
I'm executive director of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, which is a pretty unique business, NGO, faith-based leader alliance. Over 500 businesses and NGOs from around the United States, everyone from World Vision to Walmart, Lennar Corporation here in Florida, to Lockheed Martin. And what we do is we make the case for why the United States needs to be engaged globally and to invest in important civilian international programs, our diplomacy and our development programs. And we try to champion a 3D national security strategy, whereby we invest in diplomacy and development alongside defense to make our country truly safe, to create as much economic growth for the future as possible, and also to convey and reflect our values as Americans.
How do you see the challenges facing the United States of America in general at this time in history?
Significant challenges abroad. It is, first of all, the world is as interconnected as it's ever been, so that provides both opportunities and challenges for us. But events have repercussions everywhere. The instability in North Korea, refugee crises, failed governments in Syria, destabilization in Venezuela. All these have repercussions back on the United States itself. So there are significant things. And what in our coalition, we have 175 retired 3- and 4-star admirals and generals, flag officers, who make our National Security Advisory Council, co-chaired by General Tony Zinni and Admiral James Stavridis. And to a man and woman, these leaders say that we can't solve these problems by military alone, that the military solution won't necessarily create long-term stability. It's expensive, and we have to be proactive in how we address global health pandemics, how we address refugees, how we create greater opportunity economic growth abroad to create stability so that we don't have to rely on the military and send troops in the future. So the only way that the only tool in our toolkit to be able to address these crises proactively and in advance is through the international affairs budget, through these civilian programs, through our diplomats, our embassies, our Peace Corps. Our long-term proactive engagement is so crucial if we're truly to get ahead of the curve on our security challenges abroad.
Please tell us a little more about how your organization interacts with other organizations worldwide.
Well, especially we're really much a national coalition too, although certainly among our leadership for NGOs like CARE and Save the Children and Catholic Relief Services and World Vision, they conduct U.S. policies, they implement U.S. policies abroad too, in partnership with the U.S. government and in partnership with their own donors. So we are a coalition of members from businesses, from NGOs, faith leaders, and what we try and do often is allow them to tell their story. We convene them to give our retired flag officers, our NGO presidents, our business CEOs, our returning veterans from abroad, part of our Veterans for Smart Power initiative, which unites 30,000 veterans from across the country who return from the front lines to tell their story there. So what we do is we have public events with members of Congress and the Senate back in their home states and districts. We have private events as well for quiet meetings with 6 or 7 of our leaders. And we also have educational leadership to have members of our coalition in our states. We're active in 27 states around the country with advisory committees we've set up. And what we do is really empower these leaders to tell their stories. We don't ask them to take off their hat, their organizations. We want them to tell the Save the Children story, or the Caterpillar story, or the Intel, or the Facebook story of why engaging with the rest of the world is so critical for our own interests and to do the right things for our values.
What stands out as some of the most important achievements of your organization?
There are many of them. We have, I think, getting these military leaders right now to endorse the importance of civilian tools is a really important thing this coalition has been able to do, to get the credibility to have those 175 3 and 4 stars make the case is very important. I think getting businesses, NGOs, nonprofits to sing from the same hymn sheet is really important. That in the past, I think they saw the differences between their organizational goals as different. And now they're going together to advocate, to educate. They're partnering far more. So that's an important thing, I think, being a convener for new public-private partnerships for Coca-Cola to work abroad with NGOs, many partnerships there to implement to have these programs work effectively. And I think that is, and to bring them together and to really demonstrate back home by setting up these advisory committees and rich program activities in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Nebraska, Colorado, Utah, all around the country, where we are bringing local leaders together, local and state leaders who are internationally connected, and having them also augment a voice, like the World Affairs Councils do for policy and everything else. Now we're talking about education and advocacy to show that there are allies back home. And that's the most important value added we do, is when a member of Congress or the Senate can go back home to Salt Lake City or Denver or Lincoln, Nebraska, and see that there are his constituents, her constituents, standing up for their leadership in Washington. That's the value added that I think this coalition can really deliver.
So I'd like to ask you about the strategic allies you're associated with.
The important thing about our civilian international programs is also our diplomats, and these efforts help with our value added, our force multipliers out there in working with our allies. Particularly in a region like the Middle East is so important to work with our close ally Israel, with Jordan. It's so crucial that we empower our diplomats and our embassies, our civilian security, our foreign military financing programs as well, that strengthen our alliances out there so that we can battle against global terrorism, we can try and produce stability around the world, and again address these conflicts before they flare up into full-blown military encounters too. And this is a unique way that our civilian programs, from everything from security assistance to our allies, which is so important, to training the next generation in the developing world of police and of armies as well, to the greater professionalization, greater cooperation. That oversight and that cooperation is another essential piece that the international affairs budget affords us and strengthens our alliances around the world.
Also essential. Before we conclude, sir, what are your plans for the future?
This event today in Miami was extraordinary, is important. We continue to do this around the country right now. So we have our strong Florida State Advisory Committee. We are planning to enlarge even more beyond our 27 states, but it's continuing to hold these critical public forums with elected members, federal officials, to show that their constituents support them when they take strong steps to support our international funding. So the more we do this around the country, the stronger the support in Washington is ultimately going to be for these programs, and that's what fuels our organization going forward.
Mr. Gross, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on today.
I'll be right back.
Jewish Committee declared that Jews cannot ensure equality for themselves until and unless it is assured for all.
No one will ever forget how the American Jewish Committee stood in vigilant brotherhood at the cradle of our emergent statehood.
I look forward to working with AJC leaders to lay the foundations of peace so that generations after our time will look at all of us and say, job well done.
AJC has taken an active role in combating some of the greatest tragedies and fueling some of the greatest progress that we have known.
I know that this is anything but a matter of course for a Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany to be invited to address you here tonight.
For more than a century, AJC has been a partner and a pioneer in defining the relationship between American Jews and Israel, and a leader in strengthening that relationship.
With us now is Brian Siegal. Brian, it's a real pleasure to finally have you on the show.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here.
Please tell our audience about AJC.
Well, thank you. AJC is an international non-governmental organization, nonprofit. We have been around since 1906. So this is actually our 111th year of existence, founded in Kishinev and result of pogroms that were happening there. A group of German Jewish men who had come to the United States and done well in business, saw what was happening to their brothers and sisters of the Jewish community in those places and said, we have to use our collective voice, our clout, to speak to the U.S. administration and members of Congress to have these attacks against Jews stopped. And they were successful. And from that small beginning, an organization that is now international in scope, with leaders from all over the world and relationships all over the world. We have offices in 10 different countries. We have 22 offices in the United States, of which the Miami office that I run is one of those. And we have relationships with Jewish communities in over 30 different countries. So we work together with leaders of those communities to advocate for issues of concern to the Jewish communities and what they're facing in different places. We do it to advocate for AJC's mission, which is to enhance the well-being of the Jewish people and to advance pluralism, democracy, and human rights for all people.
As your mission statement states, really, if everyone's rights are respected, then it's good for the Jewish people as well, for all people.
Absolutely. We understand that history has taught us that our fate as a Jewish community is inextricably linked to that of other minorities, and being in a society where religious freedom is ensured. Of course, we know we have to be constantly vigilant, and these are issues of concern to us, because even in the United States, we look around the world and we see, whether it's Jewish communities or other minorities whose rights are threatened, we know that a voice must be out there speaking on behalf of those who are voiceless in many cases. We know that history has taught us that if you are silent in the face of injustice, that you can expect it not only to keep occurring, but also to come back to the Jewish community.
Silence in the face of injustice, a very great crime in itself. Why is it essential for neither Jew nor Gentile to be permitted to forget that the atrocities perpetrated by Nazi Germany in World War II, not only against Jews but other people, why is it essential for these atrocities not to be forgotten and for the lessons to be learned?
Sure. Well, obviously it's one of the darkest times in Jewish history, but we always try and explain to the many diplomats and government officials who we work with, it's one of the darkest times in human history. And we need people to understand that these types of nothing comes close to the Holocaust, but when we see anti-Semitism rear its ugly head, we've seen from history that there's a slippery slope between man's inhumanity to man. And so we therefore try and emphasize the importance of standing up for your fellow man. It's also why when we take many groups to Israel, which we can talk about, we take them to Yad Vashem, because we think it's incredibly important for people to understand the history and how the Holocaust didn't happen in a vacuum, that it was led up to by various laws that were passed and by hatred that was allowed to simmer and get worse over a long period of time. So we think that these are the types of things that we have to do to convey to people that history can repeat itself, that we cannot forget this particular period of time, and that anti-Semitism never truly goes away. And we're seeing that even in the world today, in Europe, and even to some degree here in the United States.
A thought that comes to mind is how Israel is singled out for criticism by the world media in general, a kind of, as some people call it, a new kind of anti-Semitism, where Israel is subjected to this scrutiny, whereas worse events that occur in other parts of the world don't get the same attention. Is this a new kind of anti-Semitism, in your opinion?
Well, certainly, as someone like yourself who's spent much time in Israel, you know there's a robust debate, and I don't think Israel holds itself out as beyond criticism. But when that criticism goes to question the legitimacy of the Jewish state to exist, then there's a serious problem. And we see manifestations of this in the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. We see the opportunity at a world body like the United Nations, whose founding principles are so noble, but many times because of the disproportionate criticism that you mentioned, don't live up to those noble principles. And so we believe in the UN when it's acting in accordance with those principles, but when it's not, we have to remind them, whether it's at the Human Rights Council, where Israel is held out for specific censure, really, as you point out, when there are so many atrocities happening in other places and Israel's receiving disproportionate criticism, whether it's at other world bodies. It's important to have ongoing discussions, explain to people the history, show them what Israel truly is as a democracy from the right, from the left, because we believe that Israel, warts and all, speaks for itself as a democracy, one that's pluralistic, one that stands up for the rights of all people who live there.
The essential work that AJC is doing in the United States and internationally, is it a greater challenge today than in previous times?
I think so, only because the world is more complex and it's more interconnected and global. But that's why AJC is uniquely sort of positioned to address many of the challenges. We have this global architecture with offices around the world, relationships with Jewish communities around the world, relationships with international leaders, religious and ethnic leaders. And so I think we see the world as being very interconnected. We understand this maxim that is repeated so many times, which is think globally but act locally. So therefore AJC has meetings in world capitals. We have meetings, 70 meetings at the UN General Assembly opening with world leaders, prime ministers, foreign ministers. We take people all over the world to meet with top officials. But we also have meetings here locally in Miami with members of the Consular Corps. In fact, in a few weeks, we'll have a meeting with 30 diplomats from this area who are stationed here. So we believe in convening the Jewish community, having our voices heard, but also listening and respecting the positions of others and having a real discussion, because we know it's not the loudest voice that ultimately influences, it's the voice that understands the positions of others and addresses those needs. So we're very much in the business of advocacy, but we're also in the business of diplomacy. And we understand listening is half the battle.
So something I'd like to ask you is your view on the conflicts in the Middle East and how Israel, again, is not only singled out for criticism, but how we have international terrorism, specifically in the Middle East, that is really hoping to wipe Israel out, in so many words.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's tragic to see what's happening in so many parts of the Middle East, whether it's Syria and the really wanton destruction and killing that has happened there. And Israel has protected its borders, but also behaved very ethically. And so what I would say is there is turmoil in the Middle East, and we see bad actors in so many places. Chief amongst those are Iran, which, even though we now have this joint comprehensive plan of action, needs to be monitored carefully. And AJC is working with members of Congress and other international diplomats and leaders to help them understand the importance of being vigilant, making sure that Iran complies. We've already seen testing of ballistic missiles and continued violation of human rights and meddling within the region. So in terms of Israel's treatment, we think that it's one where Israel continues to do its utmost to be the nation that we can be proud of. It accomplishes so much in so many different areas. When we see the efforts by certain world bodies, whether it was the UNESCO effort to essentially try and deny the claim that the Jewish people have a connection to Jerusalem, even though we know how outrageous that claim is, it really does not lend much credibility to that institution, UNESCO. But we have seen the leaders of that body speak out against that resolution. And it's important that world leaders speak out. It sends a signal. It sends a signal that people will have moral courage, that they will speak the truth even when it's not popular. And so I think in a region like the Middle East that is so chaotic, that has so much destruction and problems, we have to believe that there are opportunities. And we've seen from history, whether it's Israel's peace agreement with Egypt and Jordan, whether it's inroads that Israel's making with some of the Sunni Arab countries in the Gulf, maybe because they have similar concerns related to Iran and otherwise. There are glimmers of hope, and I think we have to hold on to those because there's obviously much that we can't bury our heads in the sand, but we also have to look for the opportunities when they present themselves.
Brian, before we conclude this interview, tell us about your plans for the future.
Well, thank you. I think as we face a very uncertain future, we as a Jewish community have to look back at our past and understand where we are currently. As American Jews, we have to appreciate the freedoms we enjoy and the successes that we have accomplished. We also have to appreciate this country that we live in and understand the important role that it plays in the world. So AJC will continue to encourage the United States to be a leader, to enhance human dignity, democratic values, and AJC will continue to be vigilant in the fight against anti-Semitism, in combating extremism. But in addition to facing the challenges, we also have to look forward and look at opportunities to stand with other minorities whose rights and civil rights need to be protected. And we need to find that common ground. So as AJC, we will continue to be vigilant. We will build upon the relationships that are so important with other ethnic and religious groups. We will continue to advocate on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people. And hopefully we will continue to find those people of goodwill who want to join together, advocate for justice, advocate for seeing the world with clarity and especially with moral clarity. And we will do that here in Miami and Washington, D.C. for AJC's Global Forum, which is in June of this year. And we will do that in New York and Washington and world capitals where AJC visits regularly. So we look forward to facing both these challenges and these opportunities.
Absolutely essential causes. A real pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Richard.